came out today to come see the presentation. I do want to stress another point. Even though tourism sponsored this, to look into this, it's not about tourism, it's about the entire town of Lexington, how we can all join together as one, to have one vision and one goal. So that was the whole premise of this. It was to join us all together as one group and bring us together so we could all work together again. So I'm going to let you do your great presentation, which I hear is just the most fabulous presentation ever. No pressure.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. Thank you, Chris. Thank you all for coming out. I know that I met most of you over the course of the week this week. I've got a lot of stuff to share with you over the next hour. A lot of both information, just suggestions, recommendations for you all. I've been thoroughly impressed with the things that I've heard and seen this week. As with any community that we work with, there's this interesting dynamic that happens when people have to live together, and frustration can occur. I have 5 children. I know how much fun it is to live with other people. And there are times as a community where you kind of ebb and flow with what's going on and the energy that you feel and the momentum that you feel. But all in all, I think when you look back at this community, you look at the stories you have to tell, you look at the organizations that you have in place, you've got a tremendous opportunity ahead of you, and you've got tremendous passion in the people that we met in this process and being able to try to help realize this vision and this future for the community. So what I always like to do as I go through this is I like to start by talking a little bit about some of the market information. I think when you hear branding, you automatically jump to, oh, well, we're going to do lots of pictures and logos and all that kind of stuff. But if it's not based in reality and if it's not based in the information that really, is the truth of the market, then everything that we say might sound like a good idea, but you can't really do it here. So I want to share some pretty interesting numbers with you all. We heard the term bedroom community used quite a bit. So the first thing that I always like to do is look at your job numbers. Now, these particular numbers that you're seeing are specifically for the city limits. Every day, 1,521 people come into the community to work. 344 people live in the city limits and work in the city limits. And every day, 1,400 and so people leave to go to work. So you actually have more people coming here to work than you do leaving. Okay? It's typical that you kind of overemphasize the people that you know that have to leave and commute out, and you underemphasize the people that commute in, because you might not actually have as much of a relationship with them. But from a job number standpoint, right now, you technically are an employment center. You are bringing and importing more jobs than you're exporting. Does that surprise anybody? A little bit? Okay. So with this number, I like to dig into this a little bit more. And I do want to apologize. I promise that we will get to part of the presentation where it becomes pretty. But we got to get through the numbers first, right? So if you hate charts, I get it. But I'm going to do my best to explain these. So what these charts show us is they actually show us where the people who drive into town come from. Okay, that's what this is. So for the most part, you see how these big slices go down in this direction. The overwhelming majority of the people who work here are coming from points south. Okay, the bigger the bar, the more people you have. The lighter the color, the farther away they're coming from. Okay, so you kind of see that for the people coming here to work, they're more or less coming to the south of the river. For the people that are leaving the community to go to work, they're traveling east and traveling south. West. I've been doing that all week. Sorry about that. My dyslexia has kicked in, right? So you've got overwhelming going west, southwest, and then some heading down southeast. And you can see how that southeast has a really close dark green bar. That means they're going to Higginsville. So this just further gives us insight to both where employees are coming from and where our own residents are leaving to go to. Now, another thing that I wanted to look at is I wanted to look at how do those jobs compare. The people that are coming here, are they working minimum wage jobs? And all the people leaving working white collar jobs? So this is a lot of information simply to show that if you look at the jobs that exist in the city limit, about 25% of the jobs, 1 in 4, is bringing home $1,250 or less a month. That's a low-paying job. 44.9 is bringing in from 1,200 to about 3,333, and 30% of your jobs are above 3,333. Now, if you look at the kind of jobs that people are leaving for, your low-income job is a little bit less, it's 21%. The middle-income job is about 42%, and the high-income job is 37%. So the people that are leaving for slightly more affluent jobs. But on the whole, it's not a gigantic difference, okay? So again, that just continues to give us more and more information about what people are doing. Now, why does it matter? Why are we putting so much attention on people that have jobs? Because they make money, you know? And believe it or not, we have found that that money is the thing that is essential at helping to create a more robust community, because if you make money, you can afford to spend money. So that's kind of that basis of information. Now from here, I have some more information, but everything that you're going to see here, the area of study changes. Okay, so we're no longer talking strictly about the city limits, but instead we have expanded to a 15-minute drive time from the heart of your downtown. Now the 15-minute drive time does not get us to Richmond, does not get us to Higginsville, does not include any of our Walmarts or big, commercial centers. So all of the information that you're going to see is probably from a data set and a population number that you're not used to seeing. But median age of householder, 55, a little bit older than you might expect. Presence of children in the household, 1 in 3 houses have kids in it. That's not super old at all. That means that you've got a pretty standard breakdown there. Household type, 2/3 are family households, 1/3 are multifamily rental shared households. When you look at your the type of ownership, 2/3 own the house, 1/3 is renting the house. That's below the national average. So we have heard some comments about renters, but you're actually below the national average in renters in your community. One of the interesting numbers that you kind of blew away, there's always a national index number. The age, the median age of your household or house type is 79 plus years. That is a gigantic delta over most communities. So the index number, like if you're straight on average with the national average, your index number would be 100. You're at 223. That just really speaks to the amount of historic housing stock that you have, and the fact that that housing stock has been maintained and has been livable. Now, any of you that drive around your streets, or any of you that's ever owned a historic home, knows that maintenance of a historic house is never done, and it's also probably never as good as you would like it to be. So, as a local resident, you might think to yourself, yeah, but those houses could be better taken care of. But for all intents and purposes, they are very, very viable housing options in your community. I'm going to go through a couple more there's a ton of information that I'm going to share that really digs into everything from occupational class, unemployment rate. Your unemployment rate is actually pretty good compared to some national averages. You're falling right in line with what you would imagine on some of the poverty statuses, some of the educational attainments, things like that. But where it gets very interesting is with what is possibly the worst slide ever created. But what we actually did is we did a retail leakage analysis. Now, that is a really big word to simply mean we looked at what the stores in that 15-minute drive time sell compared to what the businesses in that 15-minute drive time sold. Businesses sold, customers bought. So the overall market is a $111 million market. Now you have a very, very interesting dynamic here, and it's called the Missouri River. That river dramatically impacts the size of your 15-minute drive time. So you actually are operating at about a third of the geography that a community typically would have in a 15-minute drive time because of the barrier that the river provides. Does that make sense? So your numbers are a little bit different, and typically I might have paid a little more attention to a 10-minute drive time, but I decided to really focus in on 15 because it made sense to give you that area without going into those major retail areas. And I want to highlight a couple categories that I think are particularly interesting for us. You're leaking $2.2 million in furniture sales and home furnishings. Now, that's a great opportunity for a downtown type business to capture some of that. You're leaking $7.2 million in food and grocery store sales. This is not restaurant sales, this is just food and groceries. This is not enough to support a new grocery store. This is absolutely enough to support some sort of specialty or additional store that keeps you from having to go elsewhere. You all apparently are particularly focused on your looks because you're spending almost $2 million other places on health and beauty stores. So again, another appropriate business type for a downtown. Almost $3 million is leaking in limited service restaurants. Now, before we came, we did an online survey, and the citizens of Lexington made it loud and clear they want more options to eat. Now, what's interesting about that is all week long, we kept hearing the same thing. The locals won't support it. Well, guess what? They are spending the money. They're already spending the money, and they're driving to spend it. Now, with this money, you're never going to capture that all. We understand that. We know that families get in the car, drive to Kansas City to go on a shopping trip. We know that there's always a certain amount of leakage going on. But the goal of this whole process, when you sit there and you say, why are we doing this? It is to attack this problem. Your locals, if they're not supporting the local business, they have become disconnected from this community. And part of the thing that we need to do is we need to remind them of why this place is special. We need to reconnect them with the market. When we talk about revitalizing a community, this is not the field of dreams. They do not come simply because you build it. We are talking about reprogramming retail behavior. We're talking about hard work at communicating and convincing and earning trust from customers. I can't tell you how many times people say, well, we had this restaurant and it was open for a while, but I mean, the food wasn't very good. Well, guess what? They're not going to support you, you know? So that really very much leads into the whole purpose of why we're doing this. We want to be able to help the community realize its own future. You have so many organizations that are trying to make the community better, but if everyone is using their own tools, then you never realize the actual momentum that the community can have. So from there, I always like to dig into the current image. These are some of the things that we saw as we looked around throughout the internet and throughout the kind of pre-existing identities. We've got this kind of welcome to Lexington that showed up on some signs and water towers and that kind of stuff. We have the city seal. These are not intended to be communication tools. You know, these are formal representations of the government, so we don't need to change the seal to do a better job communicating. That represents what it represents. You know, we find things like this is the old 150th anniversary of the battle. We've got the police badge. We've got the high school mascot. It's kind of funny. I have already found at least 4 Lexington Minutemen across the country. And I guess the first thing that I kind of wondered when I came to the community was like, so how did the mascot end up being the Minutemen in a community that's known for a Civil War battle? And then I just realized, well, it's because you're named for Lexington, Kentucky, which was named for Lexington, Massachusetts, and Lexington, Massachusetts has the Minutemen. And then Lexington, Kentucky got the Minutemen. And then Lexington, Ohio got the Minutemen, and Lexington, Illinois got the Minutemen. So it's this interesting dynamic to kind of see where identities filter their ways through to different communities. So it was kind of neat to see that come together. And then all the way down to the Chamber of Commerce. And even finding this, with most of you have probably never seen this at all. This apparently was a design study that a design student did as they were going through and just showing recommendations of what they thought it could be. And you can see a couple of your downtown buildings. So from this, when we talk about branding, branding is very much focused on being able to have a toolbox that stitches together all the different things going on in a community so that the community can realize and better receive the communication. We assume that everyone always has their ears on. And unfortunately, that's not the way that it works. So we want to be able to create a cohesive message so that it is received by more people. So the first thing that we always like to do is we like to start with colors. Colors are unbelievably important in connecting the dots. And I'm here to deliver a very important message to you today. When you do community branding, there is no rule that forces you to use your high school colors. In fact, sometimes using your high school colors can be problematic. Take, for example, where I went to school. I went to school at Wade Hampton High School. We were the gray and red. And in my 4 years of high school, I saw 2 wins in football. So needless to say, our self-esteem was not very high. And when we see gray and red, we didn't really think a whole lot about positivity and uplifting, right? So we absolutely know that here in Lexington, there is automatically pride around the Minutemen. There's automatically pride around those colors. We're not suggesting changing that, of course. We're suggesting adopting a color palette that makes sense from the community standpoint, from telling the story of the place. And what I actually did was I took several pictures throughout the community. I took a picture looking over the bluffs down at Missouri River. I took a picture of the downtown, the courthouse, all the different things that I really heard named during our input process. And then I took one other that I thought was kind of interesting, an image of some hemp bales, because I think that the story of the battle here is a truly unique story. There are a lot of battlefields. There are a few that were won because soldiers literally rolled bales that protected them. It's a cool dynamic. So what it actually landed us on was it landed us on a 6-color palette of blues and greens and this nice kind of warm earth tone. Now, one of the things you might notice is in this color palette, it doesn't really have very much in the way of brick color. Well, your downtown owns brick. You have brick everywhere. So the thing that we actually did is we intentionally knew that this was going to exist alongside that color. We didn't need to incorporate it and have that be too much, but instead we kind of knew that the physical space contained it, and we selected these colors to go along with that. Now then from there, we started to look at typefaces. Typefaces are very, very important in connecting the dots. Rarely do we put a whole lot of thought into those typefaces. Typically, the way that a community's mindset works is if we are historic, we find something that looks old and scripty, And what we did is we selected 2 different typefaces. The primary is a very, very traditional serif typeface, and it has what's called a narrow horizontal scale. If you notice the letters are kind of close together, That's because Lexington has a lot of letters in its name. So it's a typeface that works for our identity. And then for our secondary typeface, we actually selected what's called a sans serif typeface that was inspired off of the label there on the column. It is amazing how many people, in fact, my wife posted a picture that I shared with her of some of the beautiful houses here in Lexington. She posted it on Instagram yesterday. A friend of hers who lives in Kansas City, who has over 100,000 followers on Instagram, said, "Oh, I've been to Lexington. It's beautiful. There's a cannonball stuck in the column there." Now, granted, I understand. We're a complicated place with a lot of different personalities. We don't want to be simplified down to a cannonball stuck in a column, but you always want to be ready to take that hook and tell the rest of the story. So that really creates the basis. But on this next slide, we start to look at what we call the word type, and it'll illustrate for you why I selected that primary typeface that I did. The thing that is so nice about this typeface is you can be as ornamental or as plain as you need to be. And that was something that I felt like was very, very appropriate. There is no doubt that you all have a traditional foundation. You've got to look and feel a certain way. So we were allowed to kind of dig into this and create something that had that versatility built into it. So we see our colors, we see our typeface, and then that carries us into the message. And with this, what I always like to do is I like to write a narrative that I call a brand statement. So now, I got a little disclaimer before I read it to you. I wrote everything since yesterday. I was not an English major. I do have dyslexia. There probably is something spelled wrong. Give me a little grace. I promise that I will go back and spell check a second time. I know that it doesn't have any words with red squiggly lines under it, so I know I'm at least close to being right. So I'd like to read this for you now. For nearly 200 years, people have been drawn to this handsome community on the bluffs of the Big Muddy. Lexington rose as a center of commerce and has witnessed some of the most famous attempts to conquer the West. From Lewis and Clark, who paddled past our banks on their monumental expedition, to the Santa Fe Trail that fueled our nation's growth into the great Southwest. As the headquarters of the Pony Express, our ingenuity showed the determination that America could truly conquer the Wild West. The Civil War's Western Front was battled right here on the edge of our own downtown, in the shadow of the historic Anderson House. The Battle of the Hemp Bales perfectly captures both the struggles of war and the ingenuity of the battlefield. Our people have long been determined to preserve our stories. This can be seen in our stunning homes and the architecture preserved along our main street. We are truly proud of our past, but we are not done. Through the decades, we have fought fires and sandbagged against floods, worked alongside one another when times got tough. We have celebrated as friends and mourned as family. As we near our 200th birthday as a community, there is a new energy emerging, an energy born of the same determination our forefathers had, an energy focused on coming together, on casting a vision for our future, and on working alongside one another once again to revitalize that vision. The time for talking is through. The time for planning is past. Now is the time for doing. We invite you to visit this place we call home, this place where journeys begin, this place where ingenuity is our story. Discover this special place, this place called Lexington, Missouri. History in the making. So what that narrative really does is it stitches together all those things that we heard you all say were important to you and lead it into this direction, this very simple phrase. And you see when that kind of comes together, this simple idea of history in the making. Now, I know there's an ongoing battle in this community of, do we use the courthouse or do we not? We're more than the courthouse. Yes, you are. But it is such an orienting element to the experience. It is rare that I lean on the architectural element like that, but it just felt right here. I think you can move forward with confidence knowing that it is a symbol that everyone understands. It is a symbol that represents the heart of your community. It gives you the ability to have an expandable system. It's designed in a way where it's simple, it can be implemented in one color, but it also begins to create what we call an icon-based system that allows for a significant expansion. You don't want a logo that just has the Pony Express. You don't want a Santa Fe wagon or the steamship Saluda, but all of these are the stories that we're telling right alongside each other. But I think the thing that I really liked was this idea of action. And it kind of jumped out as I was digging in last night that what do you find right there in the middle of Lexington but ING? Well, you are doing. You are the place where you can go hiking, you can go eat, you can go shopping, you can go exploring. Now guess what? I will sit there and say you can go shopping, and there are plenty of people that automatically say, yeah, but it's not like it was. You can go dining, yeah, but there are only two places. That's not helpful. You can go shopping right now, today. You can go and eat and explore and learn today. And you have the opportunity to inspire someone today who will take the risk to create that density tomorrow, create that opportunity tomorrow. So we definitely need to be able to wrap our arms around the opportunities that we have right now, because they are obvious. I made the comment a couple times. As soon as I stepped foot in this community, I understood where some of the negativity came from. It was not that I was overly impacted by vacancy or lack of restaurants. It was that this community is so stunning. Your potential is obvious to every single person who steps foot here. And it is up to us to make sure that we realize that full potential. Now, again, if the system stops here, we haven't really done anything. We've thrown out a new logo. We've thrown out a little tagline. Nobody's connected to it. Nobody takes it and becomes the champion. When we dig into brand extension, that is where the elements begin to make their way throughout and stitch together the efforts of our community. Now, one of the first things that hit me was all the different organizations. I heard 40 some odd, 42 community organizations. That is a lot of meetings, right? It's a lot of meetings. So one of the things that I did want to talk to you about briefly is there was some discussion over the past couple of days about Main Street. Some of you might have heard about it. Some of you might not have. I'm going to give you the 2-minute crash course. Main Street approach is an approach that was created in 1977 by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, where they realized that building owners would never be motivated to restore buildings if there was not a market that surrounded that investment. You had to be able to have vibrant markets to justify preservation investments. And what they accidentally did was identify the base ingredients of true economic development. And those 4 parts are design, organization, promotion, and economic vitality. Now, again, I don't want to spend all day on this, but one of the things that I tried to do is I tried to line up pre-existing organizations with these tasks that are to be performed in the community. The Historic Preservation Commission is performing a lot of the functions that are kind of focused on the design arm. Betterment, community betterment is kind of an interesting one because in theory, community betterment is kind of in the place where an organization committee might be external communication, bringing together a platform for sharing and getting everybody on the same page. Community betterment is also managing the low interest revolving loan fund for facades, which is a place where it kind of overlaps into what the design committee would do, so that's why you see it kind of slid. Tourism is primarily doing promotion and marketing for the community, but they also have kind of slipped into some internal and local communication as well. That's why the overlap. But the fact is, when I started to think about the economic vitality arm, who's going out and starting to build a startup culture? Who's going out and talking to local business owners in the region who might consider second locations? Who's going out and trying to connect risk takers with available space? And I didn't see anybody filling that gap. It doesn't mean they're not doing it. It just means over the past 3 days, I didn't see an obvious player who that was their primary goal. I think there are a lot of people doing a little bit of it, but it was hard for me to say this group seems to own economic development, especially with a focus on downtown. So does that make sense to everybody? So the Main Street approach is remarkably valuable for communities because it places a focus on the 4 necessary pillars. It does not mean that there has to be a whole nother organization. It is an approach. So figuring out ways that this tried and true approach to revitalization that's working in thousands of communities across the country as we speak can be implemented here. I would say that's something that's valuable for you all to look at. But it doesn't mean, oh, we're going to throw yet another organization in the mix. So from there, talking about those organizations, we know this. We've got this group called tourism. There's a big move in the industry to move towards, visit Lexington, whatever. Tourism is a misnomer. Most people hate the term because the moment they hear tourist, they think somebody with a camera around their neck and a Mickey Mouse t-shirt. Tourism really is about visitor markets. Money that can be made from people who do not live here. And we heard from the business owners yesterday morning loud and clear that tourism is doing good things at trying to bring people to the community to spend money. Chamber of Commerce, you've got this great organization right in the heart of downtown. Oftentimes the Chamber of Commerce is kind of the one that is cultivating the sense of a business community. They're offering networking opportunities. They're doing those things that are drawing those members together and providing enriching activities. So a lot of chambers across America have really been moving their kind of look and feel a little bit more towards some economic development realms. Current logo is kind of like this. This is just showing where you might be able to evolve a little. I actually tried to use the icon of a square since you're located right on the square and create this interlocking C for Chamber of Commerce. So, this is just to get the creative wheels turning. Lexington Arts Council, again, they have this kind of pre-existing logo. So I like to show sometimes where they can just incorporate certain elements of the typeface to be able to tie in without feeling like they're changing everything. I kind of saw the Lexington Wind Symphony, which I thought was kind of cool. So created something where they could, tie into that. The Battle of Lexington, again, what you start to see is you start to see the expandability of this. Once you identify the core components, it becomes very, very easy for you to go through and create that expansion. Now, we talked about the schools. Guess what? The blue and red doesn't go away. So you have this logo for the school district, and what did we say? Tagline, history in the making. Well, for the schools, the tagline, future in the making, because that's exactly what they're focused in on doing. And for those of you that are passionate about the Minuteman, this is not a suggestion for change. This is a suggestion for addition. But if you've ever met kids, they love things that are new and fresh. So, again, just trying to show how the word type can make its appearance, but you can preserve the colors of the school. You can really build up that mascot and have those different variations along the way. You've got a great organization running a museum in downtown with the Historical Association. So again, I couldn't actually find a logo per se. There might be one, I never really came across it. But I do know that there are a lot of historical markers that they put out, and the historical markers always feature that courthouse cupola. And then even finding little interesting elements like the Lexington community calendar. I made the comment the other day. A true unified community calendar is a unicorn. They do not exist. They're tremendously hard to try to get all the information pulled together. But when you have elements like that, you can go through and you can integrate that into even efforts like that. There are a lot of fun parts of your storyline that don't make for kind of that overarching theme, but I feel like they're things that we want to pay tribute to. I love this kind of story of the hemp bale, and I also love the idea that, hey, we want to be a place that folks might just sneak out here from Kansas City. So how do you tie those together? And again, not an overarching tagline, but kind of a, hey, as we continue to grow lodging amenities, we want to go out and grow those heads and beds. So we might launch a campaign like the perfect place to bail, perfect place to get out of town. And, I will say, I used this phrase one other time, and I've talked to a couple folks that have lived in California, and we were working in Hollister, California, and Hollister, their mascot for their high school was the hay baler. So, when you got a hay baler, you're kind of like, what do we do there? But, this is a message that people kind of get. They're always looking for an excuse to get away. And then, I cannot claim this, but it's true brilliance, and, we're going to give some credit to the back of the room. The whole idea of this is how we roll, those are really, really fun ways that you can take that message and kind of make it available for people to have. And even formalizing things like, just simply formalizing established 1822. I mean, these kind of things are good tools to have. We hear a lot of talk about Block 42. I mean, heck, I'm game for that, right? Having merchandise that people want to wear and making it available to the businesses to profit from. For some reason, in communities, we villainize profit. I want our businesses to make money off the pride people have in Lexington. So being able to create things that people want to wear, I'm a big believer that most people, they either have local high school memorabilia or they have what we call car wash t-shirts. They're the t-shirt with 7,000 logos on the back. They're so ugly that you only paint or cut the grass in them. And being able to have that kind of market-driven, nicely designed stuff, as you know, and as is a hobbyist, I love hats. So I always design a hat that I think would sell. These kind of things can be very simple. They can be very clean. Again, I love that cannonball. Our history leaves a lasting impression. Being able to take those stories and give people messaging that they connect with. Being able to carry that brand out in marketing materials. We heard the business owners say, we'd love to have a brochure. Right now, they're working on refreshing the new batch of those, so those materials are going out. But when it's ready, and don't ever throw anything that you have away. Use them up, and then integrate the new design as you go. Another thing that we always focus in on is wayfinding signage. You guys have a lot of signs in your community. There are signs that point you in every direction.
They point us to other signs.
That is true. They absolutely point you to other signs. I commented a couple times, my favorite is when you're at the light across the street from the McDonald's, and there's a sign that says, left to the original Santa Fe Trail, and right to the Santa Fe Audio Trail. It's like, okay, I'm not sure where to go. But one of the nice things is you do know the importance of signage. What a wayfinding system does is a wayfinding system consolidates the signs and truly aims to create a seamless experience for the visitor. So with a system like this, what you would see is you would see everything from our gateway signs that announce arrival into our community. Now typically those gateway signs are out there at our corporate limits, and then you drive through some stuff that maybe isn't as maintained as we would like it to be until you get into the downtown. You can always put multiple gateways. It is fine to say welcome more than once. And then you have what are called trailblazer signs. Trailblazer signs typically have no more than 3 destinations on them. The trailblazer signs scale down as you get down into the downtown, and you've got pedestrians, then you've got street banners. You guys have got, I think, a pretty exciting burst that's getting ready to happen in the near future with some absolutely fantastically designed banners that are helping to tell some of those stories, but just wanted to show this kind of example, being able to integrate in different elements and actually using the banner to help tell the stories. And that is a great way to kind of introduce that, and tourism has been working on that, so I'm not gonna steal that thunder. You will be able to see those in the near future. But then even taking that simple concept of history in the making and making its way out into marketing and advertising. And you can see that all of a sudden you get this series that's almost infinitely expandable. Escapes in the making. Handcrafted. This is from River Wild, where they're going and they're doing classes and people are actually creating things right there on the fly. Memories in the making. Charm in the making. You know, this whole idea of in the making, it is not only can it be an invitation to a visitor, but it absolutely is an acknowledgement that we're not done yet, and can be an invitation to be a part of the process. You know, going through and just highlighting these little elements, telling these little stories, you just have these fantastic, whether it's the homes, the buildings, little elements throughout, the Madonna, the trail, you have got markers and monuments spread throughout this community. Like I felt like I kept finding them in all these different places. And then even, like the quilt shop, family heirlooms in the making. That's exactly what's happening there. We were in visiting yesterday and heard a story about a quilting retreat that they did last year. And a woman and her mother went on the retreat together and created a quilt together. And then the mother passed away. And now all of a sudden, this quilt has become truly an heirloom and a part of that family history. So hopefully what you can see as we go through this is a system that is based off versatility. It's simple. It's not rocket science, but it's about telling all of our stories, and it's about allowing these organizations that are driven by passionate citizens to connect all their efforts to help tell the whole community story. So that's what I was able to do since yesterday. So hopefully there's still a lot on my list, but I feel like there's enough to start seeing the pieces come together. But I'd love to open it up for any of your thoughts, initial reactions. Does the overall strategy seem to make sense?
These are image type ads.
Right.
We have events. We'll have a pile of events coming in the next 6 weeks or so. What's the headline for that one?
Okay, so the question was, these are image ads. What do we do when we start to get to events? One of the things that I didn't dig into yet is I want to actually show you how the brand, I'm not going to show it, but it's a great question. I want to show how the brand extension makes its way into some of those signature events, because it is important for those events to be able to lean on these foundational brand elements to create their own look and feel. Now, at the end of the day, an event needs to be able to own its own personality. And that's absolutely important. But one of the things that we found is oftentimes, especially when events are run by volunteers, they lack the desire for brand consistency. They think that they need to make everything they do this year look completely different from how it looked last year. And in doing that, they're losing any continuity of the positive experiences that they might have had. They're forcing the the viewer to relearn each and every year. So what we'll actually do is I'm going to provide a couple examples of some of the major events, and then I'm also going to provide a couple of examples of what those posters might look like, so you can kind of see the brand element in place. Now, I'm really glad that you brought up events, because that was something that I skipped over.
Sorry.
No, it's a big deal here. You all are event organizers. You're event fiends. You do a lot of events, okay? So, as an outsider, it would be hard for me to come in and say, you know what you need? You need some more events. But I do want to say something to you all. And it might be a little hard to hear, but I'm going to be honest, because that's my job. You have events, and for the most part, the events are mechanisms to fund organizations. You have a lot of events that are fundraisers. The thing that you don't have a lot of is events that serve strategic functions to create that temporary vibrancy in the market and excite people about this being the kind of place that you might be able to start a business in. You don't have a lot of what we would classify as retail promotions. You have a lot of festivals. You have a lot of community imaging activities and just warm, feel-good activities. Things like the house tours are great. It's a good one because it fits directly into hospitality. But a lot of their events are using. A lot of organizations are using those events to fund. So one of the things that you're probably going to have to figure out is you got to think through and see are there any gaps where we might introduce some small, easy to implement retail promotions that teach customers from our region to shop in Lexington. Does that make sense? Absolutely. So a lot of times what happens in a mainstream organization might partner with an arts council, and they might do like a gallery or art supplies where they put artists inside retailers, and they might be painting, they might be doing watercolor, they might be performing music. So you start to have like these micro performances in all of these different retail establishments. And then in addition to that, you might have a local sponsor who says, if you go to all these locations and get your passport checked off, then you enter in to win a prize. So what you're doing is you're highlighting inside the businesses and you're promoting multiple stops to see what's in there. So the big thing that you're trying to do is you're trying to introduce the customers to the inside of the businesses. The dynamic that exists in communities like Lexington is your local consumers have virtually no motivation whatsoever to explore their own community. They're convinced that they already know everything that's here. So you have to use those events to get people in and see what's new. Now, there are a lot of failed attempts at that. One of the biggest failures is trick or treat. We're going to decide to get people to come in our stores by having small children dressed in masks where they can't see to get free candy. That doesn't work, and the merchants will hate you for it. So, being able to really formulate that idea of what kind of audience do we want, what kind of age group do we want, how do we get them in multiple locations, and how do we incent them to spend money? So, great question. Any other comments or thoughts?
They used to have a ladies' night out.
Right.
But the ladies' stores kind of.
Ladies' night out, any of those type things that, you actually, even though the women's clothing stores have gone, you have several different businesses that are focused in on providing activities and things like that. And believe it or not, women actually like to drink beverages that might or might not possess things in them. So got some of those going. So, yeah, exactly. So, you know, think what's right for yours. You don't have to go and copy somebody else's idea. There's only one Lexington, Missouri. How do you make that yours? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So we've identified that we feel we need more restaurants. Is there a way to use this to attract other restaurants to town and to help sustain them?
Absolutely. So how do we use this toolkit to attract new business? Well, that's exactly the reason why I went in and did the retail leakage information. That's not typically part of this, but it's important here. It's important for you to be able to talk with a prospect about market reality so that they can know what kind of business do we need, what kind of investment should we be making, what's realistic, what's not realistic. How do we really hone in on if I have to lease a building and then the building owner wants me to invest $100,000 in stabilizing the building, and then I have to install a commercial kitchen, that restaurant's not going to work here. Are there grants that we can use to be able to help create kitchen amenities? Yes, there are. USDA has grants that allow for just that kind of thing. Are there grants available that help building owners to stabilize and restore those buildings so that direct cost isn't transferred directly over to the tenant? Yes, those are available. But one of the biggest things that it allows us to do is by marketing through a cohesive look and feel, you start to further reinforce the connection between the business owners that are here. And then you start to have a family. And when you have that family, you have the perfect people to lean on when that prospect shows interest. So there are going to be multiple different components in there. The data combined with the professionalism that it's going to afford you, I think will actually go a long way in helping to make sure that you don't have a failure, but you're able to work with them to really cater a model that should work here. Yes, ma'am.
The last time we spoke, it was about the oldest factor of Lexington, how to keep kids here, how to keep teenagers, how to attract 21 and over. I was thinking quite a bit about it, talked to my neighbor a little bit about it, and there are so many possibilities for not only skate parks, there's so many parks here. There's skate parks, but you could by having, you could try out food trucks because kids love food trucks. I mean, they're really good. Such a long way that you don't even have to have the overhead. You have to have the food truck come in, and then if you loved that food, and you wanted that food back, then you could absolutely say, okay, well, let's see what we can do to get this kind of product permanently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, food trucks are absolutely great for testing out a market. We worked in rural Mississippi in communities that were not large enough to actually support a full-time restaurant. But what they actually did, it was this, I love this story. There were these 4 different communities that were close enough that the food truck owner went to each one of the business, or each one of the communities one day of the week. So Mondays was in this community, Tuesdays was in this community. But then it was almost a little bit like a competition. Whatever community spent the most with him that week, he returned on Friday, but did what he called chef's choice. So he would create something completely different based off what he had for that community on the 5th day. So it was this interesting dynamic where they always knew when, hey, it's Food Truck Tuesday. And then they also had this opportunity for an additional special engagement that would drive traffic there. We heard a lot of talk about breakfast restaurants. Having somebody that's serving sit-down breakfast, there might actually be a food truck temporary solution to help test that market out. The nice thing is your proximity to Kansas City probably gives you access to pre-existing and established food trucks that you might be able to tap into to be able to taste, you know, give a little bit of a market taste there. So it's a great idea to explore. Anything else?
Ben,
Yes, sir.
I'm concerned about attracting businesses, of course, but I'm concerned about attracting bigger businesses than just a restaurant. Particularly businesses that are looking for me to be out of region, out of state, and they're looking for a small town that can either relocate or have a different branch that would provide employment for the town. So is this going to attract somebody on the website? What can you do with the website that they're out there fishing around, they're searching, and all of a sudden this pops up? What could we do there that would help our region?
That's a great question. Great question. So, not just talking about recruiting small mom and pop and regional retail, but recruiting big business. And, there's some good news there and there's some bad news there. There is a bit of a mythology that those businesses are out there and ready to expand and they're simply waiting for a polite invitation. The world of site selection and you pretty much have no clue that you're in the running until those people have already vetted quite a bit there. But I can tell you this with the complete confidence. If there's any level of adoption of this kind of communication continuity onto that city level, and then, what are the goals and initiatives on the city level for that economic development? I mean, recruitment of industry, recruitment of light manufacturing, recruitment of any kind of business headquarters. Obviously, that's going to be, in a community like this, that's probably going to be an effort that's led up on the administrative level. But having a professional back end, a professional correspondence, and being able to have all this data that I shared with you, it helps to convey that this is a community that's a ready partner. Typically in 2019, with business relocation like that, your first notification of interest is an ask for incentives. And, the community's got to feel out what their flavor is for that. But I can tell you this, there has never been a community that has not focused on enhancing the satisfaction of their residents and having citizens that are happy. That's always a win in the sales process, because it means that your employee loyalty is going to be higher, your employee turnover is going to be lower, the ability to trust the investment is going to pay out is going to be there. So obviously it's not an overarching economic development campaign. There's still more work to do, but I think that it lays the foundation to start telling that story very well. Were you going to say something? Is there no? Yes, ma'am.
Along the economic development line, the economic development manager for Higginsville is retiring.
Okay.
And the county just hired economic development planning. So I've kind of got the sense that that's going to be the go-to person.
Okay.
If we want to, that county person could be the resource that we need. I know that the county still wants to have that significant, strong agriculture to it. They're not looking to, grow any, houses. And, they want to keep that flavor. We have strong presence by Lincoln University through innovative small farm outreach programs.
Okay.
Small farms and farmers markets, and then like you said, the USDA can offer, restaurant element grants and stuff. And then we have the slow monies over in Kansas, and
Okay.
that's private enterprise investment.
Gotcha.
It came out of Colorado.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the nice things is with a community that's connected to an agricultural industry like that. I live in central Delaware, southern Delaware, and we're extremely agrarian. And we're seeing rapid growth of the 15 to 25 person light manufacturing that's related to the agricultural industry. So there's definitely growth sectors around the pre-existing base. And being able, a lot of that work, a lot of that more industrial development type work is happening on a county level. It seems to be nationally. So it's It's great. Yes, ma'am.
In your visiting with people through these various workshops and all, does this town lend itself to sort of the shared entrepreneurial business where you bring in individuals with technology and they may share facilities, share support staff?
Absolutely.
High-speed fiber optic.
Absolutely. So what you're describing is what they call co-work spaces. Co-work spaces, I'm always really hesitant to recommend things that I'm scared might just be a passing trend. I have never recommended that a community do an incubator. Incubators end up being monuments to the elected official at the time and rarely end up spinning off what they hope to. The idea of co-working space has proven to be a really strong facet in very, very small communities. If you're not familiar with it, it really is just a shared office space. But the thing that's nice about it is upfit cost is tremendously lower, far fewer dividers, shared space. On average, per tenant, you're looking at about 100 square feet. On average, the tenant's paying about $100 to $150 a month in rent to have the space, shared conference room, access to high-speed internet. We've heard over and over again about internet being a problem. We have internet, it might not be high-speed internet. Some people have fast internet, other people are getting access to fast internet. When you are looking at creating a community that is workable and livable, co-working space is a great solution. I live in a community of 14,000. There's no real reason for me to be there. It's where my wife's family is from. That's why we live there. And I have a co-working space to be able to work out of when I'm home. So absolutely, that'd be a great use. Yes?
What's an example?
An example of a co-working space. If you wanted to Google one, the first one that comes to mind that I really love is called the Candy Factory. It's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and it'll be a really good one to see. It's just kind of a factory feel. It was a industrial space. Co-working spaces oftentimes are great uses for second floor downtown buildings where the building owner does not have the ability to go through and make it residential, but they can get some revenue generated from a slightly rougher, more industrial feel on that second floor. So if you look up co-working, you'll get all kinds of options, but I love the Candy Factory in Lancaster. It's a really good one to look at. Yes, ma'am.
You visited with our youth.
I did.
What did you find out?
So if you've ever sat down and had a conversation with a teenager, you know how positive those can be. Let's see the best way to frame this. We were very quickly met with some sarcasm and snarkiness, and I'm not sure where they get that from. But there was a lot. We spent some time talking with them about the kind of things that they wish they had. A lot of echoes of the same thing that the adults said. They wish there was more options to eat here. They named a couple of the businesses that they did enjoy and that they frequented here. They complained a little bit about things like the cost of the movies here and why does a movie here cost the same as it does at a bigger, newer, things like that. We heard that might be changing with some change in ownership on the theater, things like that. But, all in all, when you talk to a teenager, when you're talking to a junior or senior, there is a set mindset. They're ready to leave and get as far away from home as possible. There is no branding that's going to change that, nor do I really want to change that. I think for a community like Lexington, the thing that I think that the community really wants is they want to make sure and always preserve that when that person starts to settle down, starts to think about raising a family, that Lexington reemerges as a logical place to be. I always tell communities that if you've ever met a 24-year-old single male I'm not sure that you want to have the things that entertains that person, you know? So there's certain markets that it's okay that you're not like top of mind on. So, you know, I do think that you always find that optimism. There are a couple folks. I had one kid that came up and talked to me afterwards and talking about how he and his father were very interested in auctions and secondhand selling and things like that. And really seemed like he was interested in seeing, could something like that work here, and could we do that here? So, you know, there's always a glimmer of hope. I've got teenagers of my own. My wife and I spend the majority of our time trying to figure out which one's the dumbest today. So, you know, I try not to judge too harshly.
Did you meet with the VOTAC, with any of them?
No, we did not get to meet with any of the VOTAC, but I will tell you one of the coolest ideas that I heard, and I think it came out of some of the involvement with the HPC. VOTAC lends a perfect opportunity to introduce a building arts program here that focuses in on, and in fact, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if I misspeak, but there's already talk about introducing both tuck pointing and window restoration, window reglazing, which are kind of the two biggest top of mind issues with home restoration. And once you start to get your feet in the door there, you could expand into all kinds of amazing things with you know, marble work and with metal. You know, I've met some folks that just focus in on rebuilding old mortise locks. You know, and it's amazing the things that can kind of come out of it. But I think VOTAC and its presence here lend perfectly with the building stock and the opportunity to, by using that as an educational avenue, there's an automatic demand, and there will be a connection to both the place and the history.
There's a school similar in South Carolina?
There is. In Charleston, South Carolina, it's the American College of Building Arts or something like that. And, you know, the thing, I stumbled upon a little convention that they did about 12 or 15 years ago, and it's stunning. I mean, it's part of the reason that I decided to buy a 100-year-old house. So, yes, sir.
Did you get a chance to go to Wentworth?
I did. Wentworth is an absolutely huge opportunity for this community. I can also imagine that there are certain people in the community where seeing Wentworth closing feels like a nail, the final nail in the coffin. I can imagine that when you look at a property that large, 40 some odd acres, that many buildings, what's it going to be? Nobody's ever going to use it again. That's only going to fall into disrepair. So I can absolutely understand that that's one of those kind of, oh my gosh, what is this going to be good for us, or is this going to be it for us? Are we done? I can tell you, I've worked in community after community that has had large acreage institutions, historic institutions that have closed, whether it's schools, whether it's hospitals, and when you get somebody who is that perfect blend of a little bit creative and a little bit crazy, those can be game changers. And the fact that it has been in use so long and only out of use a short period of time, and there seems to be a focus and an interest on getting somebody else in there. But again, you never really know. You don't know how to wrap your arms around it until you know what the reuse is going to be. So it's a huge opportunity. I'm excited for it because I think that most people that would drive around it, you know, the opportunity is obvious, but it's also a lot to bite off. Yeah, absolutely.
To what extent does your your job done today, or are there further recommendations that you work up?
That's a great question. Let me tell you a little bit about where we go from here. Obviously, the contract that I have is with tourism, and the primary focus is on the marketing and kind of the external storytelling, the brand system. Once the steering committee reconvenes, reviews the recommendations, gives the refinements back to me. I'm going to move to create a comprehensive style guide and toolkit with all the things that you see. We're going to make all that available to the community. And so from kind of the branding standpoint, that's there. I'm going to go ahead and package up all of the economic data that I've pulled together, everything from the census site and from Claritas, which is the retail leakage data. And then we've also talked a little bit about kind of reconvening with tourism once the brand system is approved, to talk a little bit about a rollout strategy. So although I have hit on a lot of topics that kind of go outside the arms of the branding itself, I feel like that's kind of my duty because I see so many places and I like to share. I'm always, I would love to be able to, if it makes sense, to share things in some sort of way to get a project moving. I like to do that because, you know, I always tell folks, if I'm going to be away from my family, I kind of have to believe in what I do. And whether you like it or not, I fall in love with the communities while I'm here. So I always want to help. But there is definitely, in terms of a confines, I'm not going through and doing a downtown master plan. I'm not doing a long-term economic development plan. That's not what we're here to do. But we're really trying to point on all those potential connection points that the community needs to be considering. The redevelopment of Wentworth is huge. The downtown revitalization and being able to get our occupancy and our retail density to the point that we're re-achieving a destination status, that is essential for the community. So I'm always a couple of calls away, right? Okay, yeah, let's get you Rebecca.
So I'm very impressed, you know, with everything you've done. And I kind of get, like, what you're saying is that, like, rolling this out with consistency by here. Because, you know, when I look around, I go, you know, the fact that tourism was the impetus for this, fractioning, or the fractured state, in a sense. Immediately will turn off A, B, and C group, because they're like, oh, that's their deal.
Right.
You know, I don't know who they thought they were doing this, you know. So it's like how, the key is the buy-in. I mean, that's
Right.
the toughest part. There's so many people who this is essential to, who aren't here.
Right.
You know, and had no interest in being here. But at the same time, this has everything to do with their future. So that's kind of always the real tough part, is to get the unified push.
Absolutely, and you are not at all unique as a community. You know, that unity does not, I have never had a branding presentation end in a giant chorus of kumbaya. It's just not the way it works. But one of the things that is interesting is a very logical, common sense approach that is visual. It illustrates what working together looks like. It's shareable. I'm recording this presentation. We're going to be able to share it with anyone who is not here. And to be completely honest, I kind of have gotten to the point, now, you know, when I hit 40, maybe I'd quit caring quite as much. But I kind of got to the point where it's like, all you came and dedicated over an hour listening to me drone on, you deserve an opinion. All the people that didn't, maybe they don't yet, you know? Watch the video and then come back and gripe, right? So it always starts with a small, passionate core that believe. And then you will find that middle 60%, they're willing to go to whichever side has the louder chorus. This branding system is giving the positivity of the community a sheet music to sing off of together. And You know, it doesn't mean that everybody has to change the way they look, but you know, this identity of Lexington, the place that you're all working to improve, being able to adopt that shared identity, it's not replacing anything. There's nothing that exists yet. So it's kind of a gift, and you kind of have showed what good looks like, and let's see if we can move that direction. So, yes, sir.
Earlier you mentioned, I think, 44 organizations?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know, did you discover any of them?
Are there any redundancies in a community of 4,400 people and 44 organizations? I can assure that there's duplication.
So my question is there a suggestion or a way that they can be maybe reorganized and not have so many, but yet still be unified and all work together? Is there like an organization chart or something that we can do to make this?
You know, I started trying to tackle an org chart here, and you can obviously imagine the reason why the organizations exist is a multitude of motivations. I'll never forget the joke that was my dad's favorite joke about the man who was picked up on a shipwrecked island. And before he left this island that he had been on for 3 years, he gave his rescuers a quick tour, and he said, well, that's my cabin, and that's my shower, and that's my church. And he goes, well, what's that building over there? And he goes, well, that's the church I used to go to, but I didn't agree with what they were preaching. So, yeah. And I think that community organizations there's that dynamic where you create that redundancy. There's silos, there's ownership, there's fiefdoms, there's, you know, this is mine and I don't want anybody else to touch it. I mean, to be completely honest, you all and your time, you know, the frustration of going to duplicate meetings, to spending so much time sitting through meetings that maybe aren't producing action, that kind of change, that kind of consolidation, it really has to be born from your own frustration, to be honest. I mean, I can find a place and relevancy for everything that exists. You know, in the core, kind of the top organizations that relate to this revitalization effort, there's not tremendous overlap. There's a lot of overlap in some of the civic service and good to the community. And, you know, it's hard to say, oh, well, we should kill the lions and everybody be Rotary. Well, that's hard. You know what I mean? But I think that being able to value that time and being able to say, hey, let's see if there's a way to work together. I mean, we had a representative from the VFW and a representative from the American Legion, and we heard that the American Legion, their attendance is slowing, so maybe there's talk about figuring out how they can work together so everybody can survive. So, you know, it's all kind of born out of desperation, and I made the comment while I was here. One of the things that's interesting about Lexington is Lexington has never, from what I can tell, has never experienced true desperation. I hear people talking about your downtown today like it is desolate, like there are tumbleweeds. And it just makes me want to take those people and say, let me show you what a desperate downtown feels like. And that desperation oftentimes fuels creativity and fuels the understanding that the only way we're going to get out of this is getting out of it together. So our hope is that visually we're showing the power of that working together without you having to feel the pain of the desperation. So, y'all, I've kept this longer than I wanted you to. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for your attention and your participation over the course of the week. We're going to have this video available tomorrow. The link will be on YouTube, and everybody with tourism will have access to that. Gloria, thank you so much for all the organization you did. Chris, thank you so much for leading tourism, and Catherine making the connection, and you know, everybody that was there. Tammy, thank you for you know, whatever it is you do here. No, I'm just kidding. Tammy and I have become close enough to pick on each other already. So I really appreciate the attention. I think that you live in a truly, truly spectacular place. I'm sorry that you're dealing with some of the frustrations and tension and anger that you are. I tend to lean on the side of optimism, and I hope that people are butting heads because they both very much love this place. And, you fight sometimes and you work together others, and I really hope that you're at a nice corner because you deserve to be the best Lexington you can be. So thank you so much, Chris.